Hello, everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, September 27th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with some incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong news recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we're going to head over to Alan, where he will speak with Martin Roche, CEO at Netography, as they talk about the latest version of Netography's Fusion platform, as well as its capabilities. Alan will then sit down with Vasant Balasubramanian, VP and GM of the Risk and ESGs at ServiceNow, where they will discuss a new ESG management solution in ServiceNow's latest Tokyo platform release. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars. Next up, we are airing episode 1 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. We're then joined by Brendan O'Leary, Senior Developer Evangelist for GitLab, for episode 17 of The Lab with Brendan O'Leary. In this episode, Brendan tells us about this month's GitLab release and discusses GitLab's 6th annual DevSecOps survey. Then we have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike interviews Simple SEO CEO Brendan Egan, as Brendan explains why TikTok might be a security time bomb just waiting to go off. Then Mike will interview William Collins, Principal Cloud Architect for Alkira, as William explains why a universal approach to DevOps is required to resolve misconfiguration issues once and for all. We then go to Open Source Summit, where Alan met with Andrew Aitken, Global Open Source Leader of WePro, to talk about WePro, as well as his role in the FinTech Open Source Foundation. We will wrap up this broadcast by going to Yalla DevOps, where Alan spoke with Or Weiss, co-founder and CEO of Permit.io, to learn about its full-stack permission solution that can be baked directly into products. That's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy. Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for September 27th. First up, Apple has announced it will make iPhone 14s in India. It is predicted that Apple will shift about 5% of its iPhone 14 production to India this year and about 25% by 2025. Currently, Apple manufactures most of its products in China, but the company has been trying to diversify its supply chain amongst growing concerns of trade sanctions between the US and China, as well as pandemic restrictions that have impacted supply chains. The plan to produce more iPhones in India could also lead to Apple dropping its price there to be more competitive in the world's second largest smartphone market. While speaking of India, Samsung has announced the launch of 2 credit cards in India. Samsung is one of the largest smartphone vendors in the country, and has said that these new credit cards are aimed towards consumers in smaller Indian cities and towns. While the space is crowded, there is opportunity for growth here. Over 1 billion debit cards have been issued in the country, but fewer than 25 million unique individuals have credit cards in India. This announcement is in line with other smartphone makers, as there seems to have been a growing movement towards broadening services to its consumers, including credit cards. Next, the Australian government is thinking of enacting stricter cybersecurity rules for telecommunications providers. This comes as the nation's second largest wireless carrier, Optus, announced a cyber attack that resulted in the breach of personal data for 9.8 million customers, almost half of Australia's population. With all this being said, though, Australia currently doesn't have any laws that allow for Optus to be fined. As far as the perpetrator, though, Australia is currently working with overseas law enforcement to determine who was behind the attack. In other news, Amazon has announced that they will be holding a second Prime Day-like shopping event in October. Retail business has currently slowed down in the recent months, even for the e-commerce giant. And this new shopping sale is an indication, as well as a recognition of the need to provide for inflation-hit consumers as the holiday season approaches, which is expected to be a challenging one for retailers. Other companies have also started making changes to get more sales during the holiday season, with Target announcing that it would be offering holiday deals as early as October, and Walmart expanding its window for gift returns. Amazon hopes to get a bigger slice of the pie as consumers' shopping patterns have changed in recent months, according to inflation and supply chain issues causing shortages. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a report showing cyber criminals have found a new way to impersonate web pages of popular brands, and this time it's targeting Netflix. Inky Technology, an email security platform, discovered instances of HTML attachments and zip files that, when opened, sent users to a form that looked to be sent from Netflix. Brand impersonation isn't new, but it seems that this is just the latest attempt at it. To learn more about the specifics of this new phishing attack, go to securityboulevard.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at the benefits of moving towards cloud and serverless computing. This being said, though, you can't just simply migrate your current environment exactly as is. Cloud and serverless needs us to redefine how we think about software development as a whole. But if we can, though, we can gain massive benefits such as increased ROI and cost control. To learn more about why you should be rethinking your approach to cloud and serverless, go to devops.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at the 3 ways that Kubernetes can help scale IT's digital transformation. Kubernetes can balance productivity and safety in development teams, optimize IT budgets, and tap into open source communities and software. To get more in-depth analysis about how each of these ways Kubernetes can scale digital transformation, go to containerjournal.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to be joined by my friend of over 20 years here, Marty Resch. Marty, for those who don't know, is the CEO of Netography. Of course, within the cyber community, security, InfoSec community, Marty's very well known. He was the guy behind Snort and SourceFire and so much more, and just a well-known person in the industry, in the community. Hey, Marty, welcome back. How are you?
Doing great, Alan. Thanks for having me back again.
Pleasure. So, Marty, Netography is your company now, and we went into a pretty decent dive on it the last time you were on. And for those of you who may be interested, if you go over to techstrong.tv and search Netography, I'm pretty sure, Marty Resch, it'll pop up. But for those who are too lazy or don't have the time to do it today, Marty, tell them a little bit about Netography.
All right, sure. So Netography is a company that is basically delivering a SaaS-based offering for network security to be able to allow our users to be able to figure out, in terms of their network environment, what they've got, what it's doing, and what's happening to it. And that seems like a pretty simple proposition, but the issue that we're into today is that the world has changed to what we call at Netography, and this is something that we coined at the company, the atomized network. And the atomized network is kind of the enterprise networks that we're seeing today. So, it used to be you had a building and it had a data center, and then, you would have projects to move data centers out to the cloud and things like that. And they would be these very set piece events. Once the pandemic hit, everything dispersed overnight. Everybody got sent home to do their jobs by any means necessary. And we ended up with these networks that have points of presence across all the major cloud providers and on-prem infrastructure and remote and mobile workforces. And as a result, getting your hands around, the basics of what do I actually have in this network environment? What is it doing and what's happening to it has become incredibly difficult because the solutions that are out there, the old on-prem infrastructure from the major providers of next-gen firewalls and IPSs and things like that, my background, as well as the cloud providers that only think about the cloud. They treat the world as, these different realms that have nothing to do with each other. And, what we're seeing over and over again, especially these days, where you look at things like this Uber hack that just happened, is the attackers break in through one method, then they laterally spread out to the cloud. And once they're in the cloud, they start spreading wherever else they need to go to get their jobs done. So this fundamental question of, what have I got, what it's doing, what's happening to it is really hard to answer because the solutions are very separate. They have separate teams that run them. They don't really talk to each other. They have different languages for identifying what's good and bad in your environment. So it becomes really problematic when you treat the network like a bunch of separate little kingdoms instead of one composite system that needs to be defended by one platform that can see the whole thing. So what Netography does, we have a SaaS-based offering, no software or hardware to deploy. We import data from your enterprise, but we import real-time flow information as well as what we're going to talk about here, context, into our platform. And then we can tell you what's going on and, what you've got and kind of how things have evolved. Because a lot of enterprises that we're seeing really have been asking, especially post-pandemic, like what happened to my network? These operations teams that we keep talking to are like, oh yeah, we're totally blind. The networks are heavily encrypted now. They're scattered all over the place. I can't put sensing infrastructure out there that sniffs packets because it's too expensive to get the packets in the cloud and everything's encrypted anyway. So how am I going to do this? Well, Netography is built to answer that question.
Love it. Thanks for that, Marty. And just before we start into today's news, for people who want to get more information, it's netography.com.
Correct. Yep. Netography.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And, we have lots of good information on the website, some good customer testimonials and things like that. So you can see how people are actually using it.
Great. All right. We got that out of the way. You guys have a big announcement you've made.
Yes.
If you don't mind, let's share it with the audience.
All right, absolutely. So we have a major release that's just come out that adds in a feature called context labels, which, sounds very technical, but what it is a system to be able to import contextual information about your operational environment into the Netography platform. So prior to this, our platform dealt with flow data, and we could basically show you, what you've got, what it's doing, what's happening to it, but it was all in terms of IP addresses, and you can import some information about your environment into the platform to start kind of marrying up, real information that you care about against these events that we're generating. But much like all event-driven systems, we have this fundamental issue that we run into where when events are generated, they're generally context-free. So what the problem is that your users become the context integration platform. So we saw this back in the old days of intrusion prevention systems and things like this, where an event pops and you're like, okay, how much do I care? And then you investigate it, trying to figure out the answer to that question. And then, if you do care, then you go start responding. Well, in this system, what we're doing is much like with our, no software or hardware to deploy to make it work platform that we've already got, we're able to import context from all 5 major cloud vendors, so we can load in the bill of materials essentially from a workload that's running in the cloud and get its information about what it is, what it's doing, what security groups it's in, what operating systems it's running, all the pieces, what its name is, maybe what the applications are on it, all the information about the context of this instance, as well as context from the on-premise enterprise. So data coming out of CrowdStrike or data coming out of your IP address management system that have all sorts of contextual information about what are these devices, what are their names, who's using them, what applications are on them. So when an event happens, we can start telling you, oh, well, this event just happened and it happened to this device, which you care deeply about because now it's a name instead of an IP address that's meaningless. And there's another cool thing about it, which is the ability to start doing automated tuning of what we're looking for in the environment. So in the past, when we've tried to detect attacks or indicators of compromise and things like that, you have this fundamental issue of tuning the system. So this is one of the things that kind of nobody really talks about all that much in the attack detection and prevention world. But you've got to spend a significant amount of time tuning the system to get it to look for things that are important to you. And most of that tuning is built around, once again, context. The people who tune it sit there and they understand what they're trying to protect and what they're trying to protect it from, and they turn that knowledge into configuration. Well, that's a grind, and it's this constant curation effort that needs to be updated in order to make it work. And the system that we just deployed, essentially, when you load context in, all the detection logic in our system is contextualized already. So when we see things that certain detections should apply to, we automatically integrate them. So we essentially tune for your environment without you having to do anything other than tell us about the environment itself. And as time marches on and we start featuring up, there's going to be even more really interesting things about this capability that go into the system. But this is a real sea change in terms of how detection happens. It really does take a lot of the pain out of it and turns it into a much more productive system with a much faster time to value.
Absolutely. To paraphrase what someone else once says, context is everything, right? And it makes the difference. Look, not to play devil's advocate, but my issue has always been when we talk about this kind of thing is, look, it's great if I had six servers or 6 nodes I want to import in, but geez, I got 10,000 nodes, right? And importing in the information on 10,000 nodes so that Netography has the context, or 10,000 instances or whatever, right, is hard. What can we do to kind of automate that, or kind of auto-magical it so it just sucks it in, kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of the automation in our system is that, if you provide the API keys or the credentials, we automatically import the data. So you really don't have to do a whole lot to make it work. We're also friendly with things like Terraform. So you can use those kinds of tools to essentially automate the importation of all this information and get it updated continuously on the fly as needed, so that you don't run into this. I just stood up a new instance. Now I got to import the context. Oh, there's another one over there on a different cloud. I got to import the context. It doesn't work like that. You tell us kind of the basics and we go figure it out for ourselves.
That's key, right? That's really the key.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's daunting, right? Because the flip side of it is the protection is only as good as the context you give it. So if you're not going to give it.
Yeah, well, that's very true. And we sell to the biggest companies in the world. So, you name it, tech companies, banks, medical systems, things like that. So nothing that we do doesn't address the issue of how is this going to scale in real world environments. We're still a small company. We're still early stage, but even with that, we are dealing with tens of billions of flows per month right now already. It'll probably cross the 100 billion flows per month pretty soon.
Cool. That's crazy. Marty, is this available now?
It is. Yep. It shipped on the 21st of September, so it's out and available. We are fielding it in customer environments already, and the early feedback has been tremendous.
And if someone's an existing Netography customer, is this an add-on? Is it part of it? If they're a new customer, how's it sold?
When you log into your portal, it's just there. It's ready to rock. There's no software to upgrade. There's no hardware to deploy. There's really nothing to do. It's just new features keep getting added in the system. This is obviously the beauty of the SaaS model is as we build better, more featureful, more impactful systems, you just get the benefit of it because you're a subscriber to it. And that's a hugely powerful model. From my old days in the appliance world of doing, software updates and rollouts and things like that, it's nothing like that world. In this world, we update the system and you get all the benefits and you don't have to do anything to make it work. It's just new features show up, bug fixes just show up. You don't have to do a bunch of curation to make it go. Got it.
It sounds almost too good to be true, but it really is true, right?
It's amazing. The SaaS model that the company operates on, we've all seen it in business software and things like that, but in enterprise network security, really nothing like this has existed before. It's pretty fascinating. being able to do real-time network security monitoring without having to do all of this stuff ahead of time to make it go.
Absolutely. So, Marty, look, it just came out the 21st, but without talking out of school or getting any of us in trouble, where do you go from here with it? What do you got following that up?
So we have features coming down the road, obviously. So we're going to build more importers and integrations and things like that. So Netography has two kinds of integrations. We have response integrations of us being able to talk to things like, tell your CrowdStrike to quarantine a device that we just saw speaking out to a known C2 or something like that. So you've got those kinds of response integrations available. Talk to your firewall, talk to Splunk, whatever. And then we have integrations for context importation as well. So bringing in more platforms and things like that, different EDRs, different IP address management systems, CMDBs, things of that nature. So we have those things coming. The rule language is going to continue to get featured up. So we're getting to the point where the rule language itself will be able to, and this is down the road, this doesn't exist today, so just FYI, where the rule language itself will be able to set context labels in the system. And once you have something like that, then you can do all sorts of really interesting things, because then you have the ability to start essentially building detection systems that can update themselves on the fly and can pull in additional detection logic as they go, which is pretty fascinating, because if we get really interested in something, for example, we see an indicator compromise that shows an attacker is, possibly in the environment, we can essentially switch on all sorts of additional detection logic to track what we see going on using methods like that. So what it does is it builds a more dynamic system. Again, we're all about super fast time to value, super frictionless deployment. So all of this capability will be brought to the table without really expecting a lot of the user to make it work. It's just going to be additional functionality and capabilities that show up in the system. And it just keeps getting better and better. And, we have a team of people at the company who've been working in this field for, like me, 25 years. So it's, there's a lot of care and expertise going into bringing in these additional features as time marches on.
Absolutely. Marty, we've been in this industry 25 years. The things that you're describing that Netography is doing today and will do in the near future seem almost, 25 years ago would have seemed like a fantasy, right? That we never could have done these, we didn't have that kind of capability. But as you sit here now and you look back from 25 years ago and looking forward, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we've made a lot of progress, and we're far from done and we're far from perfect, and I get all of that. But half glass, half glass, half empty, half full. Are we winning this kind of battle to make things more secure, or are we just treading water, or are we losing ground?
Well, I don't think we're losing ground. I think we're definitely making progress as time marches on. I mean, there's lots of little things, sometimes big things. This approach that we're doing is all about, so one of the issues that we've gotten into as an industry right now is that with all of this motion to the cloud, but it's turned into this, this hybrid atomized network that we talk about. We're relying on a lot of things to kind of to work that maybe will or will not work. So, for example, we're relying very heavily on endpoint detection and response, EDR, to do a lot of the heavy lifting that we used to do with IPS and NGFWs that has gone away in the wake of this pervasive encryption. The perimeter's gone away, and this, all the traffic's encrypted, so it's blinding all these deep packet inspection systems. Well, we didn't replace that capability with anything. And quite frankly, the EDR technologies that are out there have a certain scope of application that doesn't incorporate everything that used to be done at the network level. So we got rid of a bunch of capability. We didn't replace it with anything. And, and the theory is that, well, if we have strongly defended endpoints and we use zero trust, then we'll be okay. But we see we see the application of that not working out quite so well because zero trust maybe isn't implemented fully in an environment or whatever. This week, we're all hearing about the Uber attack, which was essentially somebody went after the multi-factor authentication system. And then once they got in through that, then they started leveraging through lateral motion. And, like a lot of this stuff would have showed up in the network if people were watching, but this isn't the scope of attacks that you usually would look for in the old style systems, but they would show up in a system like we've built here. So I'm not saying we're solving security. We're once again, we're a component of it, but I think we have the right approach for the world that we are living in now and are going to be living in moving forward, as opposed to kind of these backward-looking approaches that have been prevalent for the last 20 years. So there's that, and then there's other things like system security and walled gardens. I got my iPhone in front of me. We've got a walled garden that actually helps with security. Like, they've built an actually pretty robust security platform. So there's things like that. You see a Linux kernel moving to incorporate Rust now instead of C++. And Rust, makes it harder to shoot yourself in the foot. And, these are all raising the bar. It's baby steps, but, it adds up, right? So there's lots of things. I do feel like we're making progress.
Good, man. That's your good word for today. Hey, Marty, congratulations with this. Keep us posted. Keep us posted on it. Come back and visit.
Absolutely. Love it. Be happy to update you when the next opportunity arises, Alan.
All right, netography.com. And if you just go to the front page, people can get more information on this context type of offering. Yeah? Hey, Marty, thanks. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be back in a minute with just a minute with another guest.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. I'm happy to have a friend of Techstrong TV. He's been on here before. I want to introduce you to Vasant, and I try really hard on his last name. It is one of my most challenging ones, but I actually usually do a decent job. Vasant Balasubramanian. Good? All right, but I call him Vasant. Vasant, in case you don't know, is with ServiceNow, but I'm going to let him introduce his title and his background. Vasant, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Why don't we start with a little bit of who is Vasant?
Thanks, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here again. Vasant Balasubramanian, as Alan got that exactly correct. I am the general manager for our ServiceNow's risk and ESG solutions, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And, Vasant, you got to hand it to ServiceNow. They always come up with good backgrounds and stuff that are on target. As we can see behind you, the big news is the next platform release of ServiceNow has been out. It's called the Tokyo release. And it's, as always, chock full of new features and great things for the user base to use. We were lucky enough, we did a previous interview with another GM at ServiceNow, Mitchell Ashley on my team did, where we kind of did a broad overview of Tokyo and all of the great things in there. But today we wanted to really focus in on what's in Tokyo in terms of the risk business unit and ESG, which I'm assuming is right in your sweet spot. So I almost feel, though, that we need to do something, though. Maybe someone hasn't seen that prior interview. If you wouldn't mind, Vasant, a quick minute or two kind of broad Tokyo overview, and then let's dive into the risk and stuff, stuff for people who are interested in that.
Absolutely. So Tokyo, big release, right? So we continue to innovate strongly across the board. So ServiceNow, remember, being fundamental to the driving business transformation, digital business models across the board, ServiceNow has been rolling out a range of capabilities, strengthening existing capabilities, as well as innovating in a whole bunch of new areas. So obviously the area we're talking about today is around ESG, and we'll get deeper into it. But a few other areas that are interesting are supplier lifecycle management, which is really relevant for managing suppliers and onboarding or offboarding the rest of the lifecycle. enterprise asset management, builds on huge strength on our hardware asset management area, but then managing all kinds of enterprise assets across the board. I will also connect these subsequently to an ESG point of view because they're all relevant also from an ESG point of view. So broadly, a bunch of platform innovations around security in the platform. We're really looking at this across the board and saying, look, customers coming and asking us for a range of things, and we're saying, customers, we're helping you navigate all of your complex business challenges across all the different industries that you're in, all the different business models customers are driving across the board, and in Tokyo, connecting them to what is good for the planet, good for people, and good for business. So that's Tokyo.
Excellent. All righty. And thank you for that. Let's dive in now, though. Let's really do a little deeper dive into what's in here regarding risk and ESG and kind of your sweet spot.
Absolutely. So for today, what I wanted to spend, honestly, most time was talking about the ESG release. And that's where the big talk track for Tokyo is. So I'm going to take a second to just set the context for environmental, social, and governance, right? ESG. And it is an extremely hot topic right now. And most people have ESG, either they've heard about it, sustainability is important, it drives purpose. And of course, boards are talking about it. Regulators are talking about it. Regulation is either on the way or it's already there. Now, the nice thing about environmental, social, and governance is it turns out to be, as I said earlier, it's not just a feel-good thing. It is something that we do that is good for people and the planet, and it is good for business. And not to forget that, and it is good for business. So it's really about saying, how do you put both of these together and make the best possible decisions that include sustainability, include social aspects, but then also balance that with business priorities and what's good for the long term, right? And that's why it's important. Companies with high ESG ratings tend to do well over the long run. Therefore, it is a business imperative, which is why everyone's saying, hey, that sounds great. We love companies that do well, that are thinking about the long term, have sustainable business models because the climate is changing, and they're working with their people, making sure everyone's in a good place, and it's a diverse workforce, and it's well governed. Environmental, social governance. If a company does this, guess what? They're also a better business because you'll do well over the long run. That is ESG.
Absolutely. Go ahead. That was, by the way, best definition and explanation of ESG I've heard. Go ahead.
So with that in mind, now, if you look at what ServiceNow does, we are helping companies transform digitally for all the new business, all their business models, and be that digital transformation platform for our companies in the future, period, right? This is who we are, and this is what we're driving. With that, we said, hey, as we're helping our customers do that, how great would it be if we bake in environmental, social governance into everything that they do across the board and help them be successful with this, right? So our philosophy on ESG is help our customers activate ESG. This is not just about telling the story or doing a thing or another thing. It's about how do you think about it holistically and be successful with it. So that's our approach to it. Now, what does that actually translate into in terms of bits and bytes? First, we released in Tokyo, we were in general availability because the product had been available in controlled go-to-market earlier, but in general availability, we released an ESG management product. What this does is it helps connect a bunch of different things across the board to bring ESG to life. So what it does is it helps you set goals and targets. Every company sets goals and targets. So it helps you set goals and targets for ESG. I want to get to net zero by 2030. Okay, sounds great. That's your goal. I want decarbonization, net zero by 2030. I want renewable power sources by 2023. Okay, that's another target. Sounds great. What are the metrics? What are the measures for it? Okay, sounds great. So you can collect data in the system. And third, what sustainability professionals, and this is who it's targeted for primarily, sustainability professionals, global impact teams. How do you now report on this? Everybody has an annual impact report that talks about their goals. ServiceNow has this great annual impact report that talks about everything that we are doing for ESG. And so all of this comes together to produce that report along with several standards like GRI, SASB, etc. So the core of the solution is that. Now this, in addition to, it connects with several other products like risk management, like portfolio management and project management. Because when you have goals and targets, you go, okay, that sounds great. How am I going to bring it to life? How do I know that it's actually that I'm executing on this? What are the budgets for it? What are the people for it? Well, guess what? You need project and portfolio management to do that. And ServiceNow has a very mature market-leading project and portfolio management product. So we connected this new ESG management to project and portfolio management. Second, as you're doing collecting data, as you're spending ESG investments across the enterprise, what is the governance for it? Are we doing the things that we said we would? Are we really doing that? How validated is the data? Are we thinking about our risks from a climate change point of view? Do we have data centers in places that are flood prone? That is a climate risk. Do I have crops? Am I a manufacturer who sources crops from a region that is just going to be dry in 10 years or 5 years? Well, I better start thinking about California. I live in California, and you bet we're thinking about how patterns change growth here. So if I'm not thinking about that as a business, I'm not doing my job. And so risk management is a great product for us to be thinking about those, which is also a market-leading product for ServiceNow. So between these three, ESG management, portfolio and project management, and integrated risk management, we established what we call an ESG command center. And this solution helps customers put their arms around ESG across the enterprise.
I love it. You're saying you're in California. I'm here in South Florida. We have a different problem, flooding, right? Miami, not just when it rains. If we get a good high tide, Miami floods. We're seeing here, we're near the water. We're seeing all the local municipalities now putting in, if you redo your seawall, you got to make it 1.5 feet or more higher than it was. And this, of course, is all big news, big changes. So I think increasingly, it's so funny because at the same, on one hand, we talk about digital transformation out of this side of our mouth. But digital transformation isn't just about the digital. It's using digital to help us better manage the real world, the physical world. And this is an issue. So, anyone who says, "Oh, I'm not involved in a digital thing. We're brick and mortar. Stop. You are. Software has eaten the world already. We all have to be doing and thinking along lines of digital transformation." So I think this is huge. Just a little housekeeping. Normally, if you're a ServiceNow customer, you get the new release, and this ESG platform or module is built in. It's not like an add-on or something, right? It's open. It's available to all ServiceNow customers.
Yes. So just like any of other ServiceNow products, it's a product on the ServiceNow platform. Right. And that has always been unique about ServiceNow, right? It's a single platform and all products are built on the same platform. So you choose to figure out which of the products you buy and turn on the platform, but it's all on the same platform.
Love it. Excellent. It's available now?
It is available now as of yesterday. So big day yesterday.
Absolutely is, man. Hey, Vasant, I want to thank you for coming on. You did a great job here of nailing this down. I appreciate it. We hope to see you again soon. I know you guys do your big releases, but let's not wait till the big release. Keep us posted. There's so much going on in this ESG space right now. It's so dynamic.
It is. This could easily be a long conversation, but it's exceptionally exciting space, and the potential for who ServiceNow is while we drive transformation across the board. This is what's exceptionally exciting for where we are today, is we as ServiceNow get to be able to solve not just a problem or a second problem. We help look at it holistically through digital transformation. I love what you said, by the way. Digital transformation is not about bits and bytes. It's about how do you transform your business fundamentally, bricks and mortars or anything else, through technology. And to do that while you're thinking about long-term sustainability, people, and your governance, love it. So excited.
Absolutely.
All righty. Go check it out. Tokyo release, ServiceNow. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday! Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first, tomorrow, Wednesday, September 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we'll have a look at DevOps and DORA metrics, as well as some value stream flow metrics, and review which measurements may be the most important for you. So join Plutora on DevOps.com for Beyond DevOps and Flow, the who, what, and when for software delivery metrics. The forecast for tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern looks to be cloudy with a chance of DevSecOps. We are joined by cloud provider AWS and cloud security pioneers Aqua Security as they discuss the approaches to DevSecOps and the recent changes to the threat landscape. And if you join us Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, CrowdStrike has partnered with Techstrong Research to share the findings of a new Pulse Meter report. To balance visibility, scalability, and costs, many organizations are forced to make tough decisions and only capture and retain a fraction of their log data. Our speakers aim to help you unleash the full value of your log data. So that is all I have for you right now, but we have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs here for you at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real, who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Welcome! Say with great power comes great responsibility.
take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really can write well.
All right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden
finals.
buzzer. Right?
So,
She's in.
The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah.
And
That's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too. And I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell, really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah, like being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our 3 finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds
All
good.
right. We'll see you on the next show.
Hello, friends, and welcome to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brendan O'Leary, coming today from a sunny Annapolis, Maryland, on the East Coast of the United States. For those who don't know me, I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab, which means I get to talk to amazing folks throughout the software engineering space about what it means to really get code shipped into production. And we have a great episode for you today. We're really excited to not only talk about some of the key updates that came in GitLab's latest release, as we do every time, the latest release being 15.3, including some new exciting GitOps features and task management capabilities. But not only that, we're also going to be looking into GitLab's 6th annual DevSecOps survey. And to help me sift through all those findings here today, I have with me 2 very special GitLab guests. One from GitLab's product team, we have Hillary Benson, Director of Product Management. And from GitLab's public sector team, Bob Stevens, Vice President of Public Sector at GitLab. And they'll join us later in the episode to discuss some of GitLab's brand new survey findings and what they really mean for the state of DevSecOps today. But first, let's dive into the GitLab updates. So as you know, on the 22nd of every month, GitLab is released, and this month was no exception with the release of GitLab 15.3. And I'm really excited for a lot of the changes here. First is something I've been looking forward to, honestly, for a long time, and I'm really excited it's finally here. And this is creating tasks within issues. So, tasks allow you to take what might be, a larger issue and break it into smaller, discrete work units that can then be worked on. And before in GitLab, you could have, things like markdown checklists or sections in your description to help with that, but they're not, arrangeable easily. You can't label them or manage them anywhere outside of just that, description markdown. But now you've got these tasks within issues in the child items widget. And you can open a task directly within the issue, update the title of that task, set a weight for the task, or add a description. And those tasks will help you break down the work within projects for GitLab's free tier, and can also be used to create another level of planning hierarchy for premium customers who are using epics, issues, and now tasks. In the next iteration of tasks, you'll be able to add labels, milestones, and iterations to any task to help you organize where those tasks should fall. And that represents our first step in the next evolution of issues, epics, incidents, requirements management, test case management, all of these different work items. And so there's be a lot more to come here as we continue to iterate. Another huge update in 15.3 is something we announced a while back, but it's finally here. And that is that the GitOps features of GitLab are now available in our free tier. So when you use GitOps to update a Kubernetes cluster, it can also be called maybe a pull-based deployment, right? Where you have an agent that sits in the Kubernetes cluster and pulls what the known state should be from a source code, a place where you manage that infrastructure as code, right? And so with that, you can kind of have a lot of improvements around security and scalability and stability, as the cluster can kind of contain itself, and you don't have to have an external agent working on the cluster, but instead have an agent inside the cluster that's pulling updates to you. And the GitLab agent for Kubernetes has supported these workflows for a while now, since its initial release. But up until now, the functionality was only available with Premium or Ultimate. But now, if you have a free subscription to GitLab, you also get the pull-based deployment support. And these features that are available in GitLab free help small, high-trust teams, or may be suitable to test the agent against what you want to be able to do with Kubernetes and GitLab until you upgrade to a higher tier for some of the more of the features. In the future, in Premium, we're hoping to add multi-tenant support. And this would be similar to impersonation feature that's already available for our CI/CD workflow to help you decide, kind of role-based access to multi-tenancy. Some other features that were added in 15.3 include adding approval rules for all protected branches. So you can now have MR approval rules that apply only to the protected branches in your project. That helps you, selectively apply these compliance controls so that you don't have to worry about, MRs that are happening kind of upstream of the main or the protected branches of your project. You can also submit merge requests, reviews with summary content. I love this feature. So if you don't know what a merge request review is, this is the ability to comment in multiple places along a merge request without, sending the merge request owner a bunch of emails for each comment. You can package them all up in a review and have all of your comments come at once. But now you can also summarize your request at the end, right? So in addition to specific comments on specific lines, you might want to have, the summary of your review, or how you're approving it, or if it looks good to you, and these are just minor changes. When you submit the review now, you can add that summary comment along with, all the quick actions you expect, like, hitting /approve to approve the merge request in addition. There's also a new UI for custom HTTP headers for streaming audit events. So you can add or remove HTTP headers for those streaming audit events directly within the GitLab user interface, which makes it easy to interface with other systems that might expect specific header values to be present. And this was previously available through the API, but now is available in the GitLab UI. And then two other features I wanted to point out. One is maintaining SAML group links with the API. So up until now, SAML group links had to be configured within the UI, but now you can also manage those SAML group links programmatically using the GitLab API. So that way you can automate all of your SAML group management through that API. And lastly, you can define password complexity requirements. So you can now have additional requirements in addition to the minimal password length. For instance, should it contain numbers, uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and symbols. And since complex passwords are less likely to be compromised, the ability to configure this and force those complexity requirements will help administrators enforce their password policies across their organization. Again, that's a quick overview of only a handful of the over 60 updates to GitLab in GitLab 15.3. As always, you can take a look at the blog post. If you just Google GitLab 15.3, you'll be taken right to the blog post about it. And there's been a huge number of improvements since 15.0, and we're really excited for what's coming next. So stay tuned to the GitLab blog for the full list of updates. Now, I'm excited this year not only to announce GitLab's 6th annual Global DevOps Survey, but also to dive into all the findings we had. This year, we were able to survey over 5,000 DevOps professionals, and the findings highlight where we are with cybersecurity, with global DevOps adoption, and with new trends and technologies that are taking the industry by storm. Hillary, thanks so much for joining us today. So, as one of our security thought leaders here at GitLab, what did you see as the key takeaways from this year's survey?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brendan. I appreciate it. So I think there's a lot really to take away from this year's survey. If I had to pick out just a few things that are particularly relevant from a security perspective, there's three main things I think I'd highlight. The first one being that regardless, kind of globally, regardless of whether you're in a development, security, or operations role, folks agree that their top area of investment in 2022 is in security, which I think is pretty significant. It's not entirely surprising that everyone sort of says at a high level that security is important, but when you're actually talking to folks who are in non-security roles, highlighting security as a top priority, I think that sort of is indicative of the rubber meeting the road, and security really actually being a top priority in practice and not just in philosophy, right? So that's a pretty important takeaway. I think this survey also revealed that security professionals are starting to really see their roles change in relation to the whole shift left paradigm. So 57% of security team members said that their orgs have either shifted security left or planning to do that this year, which I think is pretty significant. And I think that developers are starting to see kind of the day-to-day hands-on activities with developer teams sort of changing and becoming more concrete. And then the last thing that I'd highlight is probably just the broader concept that DevSecOps in general is becoming more of a daily practice and less of just a philosophy that people are aligned around. It's becoming more and more real. And there's a few things in this survey that I think point to that actually. But for instance, just over 3/4 of ops teams agree that at some level developers are able to receive and then also address security issues during the development process. And that's not that's just one thing that you need to be able to do if you're implementing a DevSecOps program, but that's a pretty significant number. So those are the main things that I think I'd pick out and point to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And like you said, it's maybe not surprising entirely that security is top of mind, but to hear it being put into practice is, again, maybe not surprising, but good to hear. So what did surprise you in the survey? Like what did you not expect, or what was kind of surprising to you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. The extent to which the developers are taking on not only security type responsibilities, but also infrastructure ops related type responsibilities, I think was fairly surprising. So we've seen a lot of focus on shifting security left. But the survey seemed to indicate that developers' roles are really sort of shifting in a lot of directions. And they're taking on more traditional ops responsibilities. So for instance, there's over 1/3 of the developer respondents say that they're instrumenting their code for production monitoring, they're creating their own infrastructure, monitoring their own infrastructure, they're on call for when those apps are running in production. And those are all things that typically used to be pretty exclusively held for operations professionals. And so I think that the fact that that's shifted a lot was something that I thought was surprising in terms of how much it's happening, if that makes sense. And then I think the other big thing is just how big of a problem toolchain sprawl has become. So we obviously know that maintaining toolchains is time consuming. That's not new or surprising. But I think the extent to which that this has become an issue is what is surprising. And so there's nearly 40% of folks said that they're spending between 1/4 and 1/2 of their time managing their tool chain, which is that's just massive. And I think that's more than double of the 2021 percentage. And so it's always been an issue, but how significant that increase is and the amount of time that's being spent is pretty surprising. And then again, it may not be surprising for folks if they stop and think, if you're a DevOps professional and you stop and count the number of tools that you use, you'll quickly reach 6 or 10. So it's not surprising, but in the results, 41% of DevOps teams use between 6 and 10 tools. And so when you actually think through it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I do use that many tools, but to see it actually outlined as maintaining 10 different tools and spending potentially up to half your time maintaining them is pretty that's pretty significant. So anyway, I think those statistics really demonstrate that there's still a lot of work to be done in uniting the tool chain for DevOps, and really I think it points out that if you want to have a productive team and you want to have better security posture and you want to maintain your budget, you got to really pay attention to what's happening with your tool chain. So those are pretty interesting points.
Again, I think you put it really well, that it's not surprising, but also it's like one of those things that isn't surprising, but is maybe shocking, right? To hear the number be so significant. And that significant period of time is critical as we're all trying to get product to market faster. But Bob, I also wanted to get some of your insights, from a public sector perspective. What's the state of DevOps adoption there? And, what does DevSecOps look like in, government and education and defense industry? What did you see there?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So overall, we're seeing that the adoption of a DevOps platform is up in both the private and the public sector space. I think that almost 75% of our respondents have either implemented or intend to implement, a DevOps platform in the near future. And quite frankly, it's required in order to meet the compliance, security, and the tool chain consolidation that they're attempting to achieve. And also, to be able to deliver software faster. Sorry. I was thinking about software factories because, in the case of the Air Force, they built several software factories with a platform. And as a result of that, they've been able to save hundreds of man hours of development time in order to get applications out in a much, much faster way. But having said that, there's still a lot of folks in the government that haven't developed or haven't built, a DevSecOps platform. I think that about 50% of our government respondents said that they have developed some sort of platform, and that may sound like a lot, 50%, but that's 50% of the respondents, not 50% of the government that's actually done it. So I think there's still a long way to go in the government. I think we all know that they tend to move a little bit slower because of their budget cycle and also because they're more risk adverse. But when it comes to security, they tend to move a little bit faster, which is why I think that they're going to accelerate the adoption of the DevSecOps platform. Because security is going to be, critical for them to implement. If you look at the focus that the White House has and Homeland Security and Office of Management and Budget, everything that they're putting out, all the guidance they're putting out is in regard to security. So they're going to have to increase or accelerate the speed at which they develop software in the future. I also know that I think a lot of our respondents, I think maybe as many as 59%, said that they feel like their development cycles remain the same or are actually even slowed down a little bit. And I think that again is because they really haven't fully adopted the platform, a DevOps platform, which is something that they need to do in order to increase those speed to mission rates that they currently have or are required to hit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, based on that, and based on this tension of speed to mission to ensuring security and assurance, that's a tension that's maybe magnified in the public sector. I think it's a tension everyone experiences, but is maybe magnified in the public sector. Based on that, and what you saw in the survey, do you have expectations about how, what DevOps looks like in the future for the public sector?
So I'm going to say that DevOps is or will become DevSecOps. In fact, I can tell you that, if we're going to see a government customer today, if we aren't there to talk DevSecOps, then they're less likely to be interested in speaking to us. That's how important the security aspect of it has become. And as Hillary said, shifting left, which is what a DevSecOps platform allows you to do, can really, really help eliminate some of the conflict that occurs between the security group and the developers today. Because the developers want to go fast. Security people want to go slow because they want to make sure that it's secure and it's free of as free as they can make it of vulnerabilities as possible. But by shifting it left and incorporating it into the development process, I think that we can satisfy both, which will accomplish the goal of speed to mission, which is what everyone in the government wants to do.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I think that's really critical, and I think that's why we see platforms growing in adoption as folks are trying to make this a cohesive. You said software factory earlier, right? To be able to make sure that we're getting software out faster and more securely. I want to change gears a little bit. We also asked questions in the survey about the state of automation, of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how those apply in software development. Hillary, maybe you could talk a little bit about this. So in the DevSecOps survey, I saw automations becoming extremely common. What else did you see around that?
Yeah, I think honestly, the main headline for me in relation to this was just how much more important automation seems to be this year than it was last year. It seems like this is really, automation is frequently spoken about as being an important aspect, but in the survey results, we had a number of metrics that were doubled, year over year, or close to doubled. So for instance, the percentage of development teams that report that their testing is fully automated has nearly doubled since last year. That jumped from 25% to 47%. And that's not including the additional 21% who plan to roll out test automation at some point this year. So that's definitely a very big thing. And beyond that, developers want more automation. About a third said that they're looking to add more automated testing in order to sort of resolve testing bottlenecks. And, it's not just about developers either. Almost a quarter of ops teams report that they're fully automated. Or at 44% that are mostly automated. Both of those numbers are big jumps from 2021 as well. And so I think across the board, automation has become something that's very, very central to increasing productivity and efficiency within teams. And I think more broadly, artificial intelligence and machine learning are already a part of a lot of DevOps teams' processes today. About half of survey takers said that they use artificial intelligence or machine learning to check their code in some form. And almost 40% of teams said that they use bots to test their code, which that's up from 15%. So from 15 to 40%, that's just a massive increase this year as well. And about a third of teams are using some form of artificial intelligence or machine learning for code review. That's almost double from last year as well. And so I think, just across the board, this has really become an additional or a much more important priority for folks to the extent that there's only 5% of teams who said that they have no plans to incorporate any form of AI or ML into their DevOps practices. So this is something that's become very top of mind for folks, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's something we'll have to take a look at. And yeah, if that, it would be hard to see that trend continue, but maybe, if it continues going up to the right like that, then we're all going to be looking at it very shortly. So yeah, thanks for sharing. So Hillary and Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. I was really excited to talk to you about GitLab's 2022 DevSecOps survey. If you want to learn more about the 6th annual survey, be sure to check out the full report. It's at about.gitlab.com/developer-survey. And it's free to view and download. Take a look. A lot of really interesting findings in there. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching today. You can find me on the internet as @O'Leary Crew most places. And Twitter is where I spend most of my time. So if you have an idea for a future episode or want to discuss anything from today's episode, you can reach me there. My DMs are wide open, or you can just tweet at me and let me know what you think. Again, the lab is produced monthly, and so we'll see you next month in the lab. Stay safe.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Brendan Egan, who is CEO for Simple CEO, and we're talking about cybersecurity and TikTok. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning.
We are seeing a lot more TikTok these days, and it seems to be taking the younger generation by storm, and they're using it for work purposes now and for marketing purposes. And you guys, of course, build a lot of custom applications in that marketing space. So what are you seeing from an adoption rate? And for that matter, what are the cybersecurity implications?
Yeah, I think, Mike, the adoption has gone through the roof. Obviously, TikTok's growth has shattered the growth of Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all the predecessors that we all know as household names. And so, the concern from a security standpoint, there's quite a few different concerns. One, from the get-go, has been this is really the first time that a foreign app has been so widely used, adopted so rapidly, not only in the United States, but in other countries around the world. Secondarily, there's concerns over who owns that app. TikTok is built in China. Their parent company is owned in part by the Chinese Communist Party. So there's some concerns over, where is that data living? What's going on with that data? What information is the Chinese Communist Party and government having not only on U.S. citizens, but citizens around the globe. And I think the reason, Mike, that you're asking that question today is a report that came out about 2 weeks ago now that says that there's some JavaScript key logging that's embedded within the TikTok mobile application, which is essentially, has the ability to log every single tap of your screen and every single punch of your keyboard on your phone. What's concerning about that, obviously, is not only logging things within TikTok, but TikTok has an in-app browser, which opens up the whole world of the World Wide Web to you, financial information, banking information, you name it. So whatever you use in that TikTok browser potentially is also being logged as well.
Are cybersecurity people starting to track this? Are they aware of this from your perspective, or is it just flying under their radar?
I think it's starting to become something that's getting a lot more attention. We've seen the government here in the U.S. issuing warnings that government employees should not have TikTok on their phones. But it really hasn't gone far enough, in my opinion. Issuing a warning versus actually having a block of something is obviously very different. They're asking people to obey to that guidance as opposed to actually mandating it down. I think the other concern is that my firm, when we build an app for a business and we submit it to Apple or Google or the Microsoft app stores, those apps are very heavily scrutinized by the respective app stores. And if we don't have all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted and our privacy policies in place, they'll just reject that app. And so one of the questions that I keep asking, Mike, is why are these app stores letting TikTok get away with this? Do they just not realize that this is happening? Which I find hard to believe, that these giant tech companies aren't aware of what's within these app codes. Or is there something else going on here that they're letting that kind of have a free pass because of how large and how much money is at stake with an app like TikTok?
It also seems that the average end user is not particularly concerned, or maybe they're just unaware, but maybe they don't really care who's looking at their data. So is there something going on with this generation of end users who are just kind of maybe expecting that somebody's looking at their data? They just don't care.
I think what's happening in this generation, in my opinion, is that we're growing up around different tools that protect us from these types of things. We have credit monitoring. Our credit card companies don't hold us liable for fraud. We have all sorts of digital wallets and different things. And I think that security has become a little bit less of a concern for the younger generation, especially the generation that's using TikTok. I think the other thought is that, they're thinking, hey, who cares? TikTok's logging what I'm doing within their app. Every app probably does that, without thinking of the implications of what they're doing within that browser. So if you're liking something on TikTok, if you're commenting on your friend's video, maybe not a very big security concern, but if you're completing a financial transaction, if you're logging into other third-party applications within that in-app browser, now that data is potentially being exposed. And I think that's where the larger cybersecurity risk is.
Is there something unique about TikTok that the other social media platforms can't just provide similar capabilities, and then maybe we wouldn't have this issue? But it seems like for whatever reason, they're unable to create that same level of user and application experience.
We've seen, copycat apps since the beginning of time. I mean, since MySpace and Facebook first took off years and years ago. And I think that as time goes on here, what we're seeing is Instagram has adopted their Reels functionality, and they're rolling out new tools to try to be more similar to TikTok, as is Snapchat. Snapchat's been trying, Snapchat probably goes head to head with TikTok more so than Instagram even. And they've been rolling out different tools and features to try to lure people in. For whatever reason, TikTok seems to have kind of caught lightning in a bottle and just very quickly grew. And as you know, Mike, when an app grows that quickly and gains that large of a user base, it can be very hard for another app to kind of come in and take over that market share. That's why Facebook bought Instagram, right? Facebook had tons of money. They could have built Instagram if they wanted to, but they knew how hard of a hurdle it was to overcome to get users to actually switch from one app to the other. And so I think we're in a situation where, regardless of what Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, other apps do, I think TikTok is going to be here to stay just because of that early adoption that it's experienced.
What is the liability for somebody who does build a service and delivers it through TikTok? I mean, are they going to be held accountable by, say, I don't know, the state of California for privacy, or will it be TikTok, or both? I mean, it seems like the responsibility just doesn't reside with TikTok per se.
The tricky thing again is that this is the first time that we have such a large, widely used app that's entirely built and hosted overseas. So in the cases of, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all the big tech companies that we have here, they have very strong U.S. presences and headquarters here within our soil, right? So they're governed by our laws here, and it becomes very difficult when you have a company that's in China for us to actually hold them accountable in some way. So unless, courts and unless the government starts to dictate what tech companies can put in their app stores and dictate what people can actually use on U.S. soil in terms of foreignly built applications, we're going to kind of be a little bit stuck, I think, in that regard. And we've seen states, obviously, like California being a leader in privacy regulations, and other states are following suit. There's even talks about a federal Privacy Act that's been getting some more attention in recent months. And those may kind of come down and have some implications for TikTok. But I think the implications, Mike, are going to fall actually on the companies that are allowing you to download TikTok, those being Google and Apple, rather than falling on TikTok itself as a company.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be regulations coming out of Washington to look at this and address this? I mean, it seems like the guys in Congress are getting a little more aggressive about these topics.
I do think there will be. I think that, with the elections and the Twitter, controversy going on with Elon Musk and all the different hot topics that are in the news, both political and non-political in regards to big tech, I do think that TikTok's going to start to take more of a front seat in terms of concern. I think that, candidly, I think that people aren't really realizing, as you said earlier, Mike, I don't think they're realizing the risk that really exists in all this data, being out there in the wrong hands. And, there's AI, there's algorithms these days, there's technology that's combing through all that data, trying to, extract things that you and I couldn't even imagine, that's being extracted out of that data being collected. And so I think as our politicians and our leaders here in the US start to wake up to that fact and really get in touch with the reality of what's going on with our data and our privacy, we're going to see over the next months and years a lot more regulation around that.
Do you think someday we'll see deep fakes based on the data that's being collected from TikTok starting to emerge?
We certainly could. They're collecting not only video and photo data, but also text data. And so, you start to worry about a day and an age as deepfake technology continues to emerge and gets better and better, where they're not only taking your persona and your information, but maybe taking, information that they might not otherwise know about you, your mother's maiden name, who your aunt and uncle are, things like that, where you could create a very legitimate deepfake, not only from a technological perspective that looks real, but also using information and spoken words that you would actually say and speak. The other concern there is that as the largest way that people often spot deepfakes is that they're not speaking in the same way that an individual speaks, right? We all talk differently. We all use different words and phrases. And so as videos and text are kind of collected and combed through with AI technology, you can not only build a deepfake that looks real, but that also sounds very real as well.
Yeah. So what's your best advice to folks right now? What should they be doing or thinking about here as it relates? Because we are building apps and people are using it, but is there a smart way to go about doing it?
You know, I think the real thing for end users and consumers is to just be careful of what apps you're using. I know it sounds like a very mundane task, but actually read through those privacy policies, actually understand what apps are collecting, because more times than not, those privacy policies say in black and white words what they're collecting, and people just don't realize it. And so, you know, try to use apps less or give apps fewer permissions to actually access data. I always recommend, you know, giving apps the least amount of permission that you need to, or give them permission just while you're using the app to access things like your camera, your microphone, you know, your photo album on your phone, your file history. You know, those apps can function without all that information. So try to give them as little information as possible. And then the other side of that, Mike, is to make sure that you're only really using apps that you trust. And so I think in the case of TikTok, I think it's going to be very hard to get people to not use the app entirely. But, you know, try using it less, be mindful of what information you're putting in the app. And most importantly, never use the in-app browser. If you're going to, you know, click on a link within TikTok or your friend sends you something to buy, don't actually open that link in TikTok, open it in your native phone browser, which is going to be a lot safer for you.
All right. Well, at the risk of sounding like an old guy telling people to get off my lawn, it may very well be that TikTok is a time bomb. Hey, Brendan, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with William Collins, who's a cloud architect for Alkira, and we're talking about the cloud security and this nasty bit of business called misconfigurations. Hey, William, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We've been talking about cloud security forever and a day, and I think part of the issue that we don't really get into is what's the root cause of this concern, because the cloud platforms themselves are reasonably secure. It just seems that the way we configure them is a huge problem. Developers are configuring these things, and we don't know precisely what they're doing all the time, and a lot of times they're making mistakes. So how do we go fix this problem?
So just defining this problem in general, like more broadly, is we're looking at any changes that teams, anybody in your technology organization is making outside of the technology teams and the business's peer view. So things are happening, changes are getting made, and nobody knows what those changes are. And cloud just in general, you know, compared to the data center days, is dramatically increased the number of changes in general. So when you have all these different teams making all these different changes, first of all, you're introducing a lot of complexity because you don't have a standardized approach to what the changes are. You don't have a specific design pattern that's being deployed. And secondly, how do you do compliance? How do you go through and manage these changes? And the simple answer from a high level is you have to have a designed and an intentional automation strategy to do this and enforce your strategy across all the teams, the developers, and anybody that needs to consume the infrastructure.
How do I make sure that happens when every developer has their own little credit card and feels free to do whatever they want?
Yeah, so that's where as organizations get bigger, they institute larger programs into their business. Maybe they think through like a cloud center of excellence, and basically anybody in this company that wants to use cloud, they got to come through an intake process. They got to come through the cloud center of excellence and go through this whole intake to be able to use infrastructure. And as they go through this intake, there's golden modules, there's golden templates that they have to go through that have this policy, that have our business intent and our compliance and all these things built in to these templates in this policy. So as they get that infrastructure spun up, all those things are built into the automation from the beginning. Because one thing to keep in mind is once something's out there, it's hard to pull it back in and remove it. You have to, get your intent in there before it actually gets deployed. Super critical.
Does that slow down the rate at which applications are being developed and provisioned, or is that more or less, a wives' tale that we tell ourselves, but in reality, it may not have any impact whatsoever?
I think initially it can, because it's a growing pain. So if you're used to having, say you spin up a Linux server or a Windows server and you're used to having root, you can go through and do whatever you please on this server. Well, that's not good. It's not secure. It's never good for anybody to have root permissions over, some sort of system like that. And same with cloud. So in the beginning, a lot of developers and teams are used to having too much access to do too many different things that are well outside of their scope. So as you reel that back in, it is a growing pain, but once you get to the point to where you have your roles and responsibilities and your access and your identity stuff hammered out, it becomes a lot easier, and it's better for these teams because they don't have to worry about all this other stuff that they had to before. Their scope is narrowed.
Yeah. Do you think the bad guys are getting better at looking for these misconfigurations, and maybe this problem's going to grow worse before it gets better?
The bad guys are always many steps ahead of everybody else, constantly going, constantly looking, constantly scanning. And, there's good bad guys and there's bad guys. So there's good bad guys that go through and try and find holes in things, and then they let businesses know. They're like, hey, you've got this problem, and we want to let you know about it before a malicious actor comes in and tries to do something with it. And organizations nowadays are willing to accept that. And a lot of startups and even AWS and cloud providers have these bug bounty programs to where they are willing to cough up some capital, so folks can come in and find holes and let them know about it, and you get a reward. So yeah, bad guys are always ahead of the game in finding these things. And the more software changes and the faster it changes, the harder this problem is going to get to solve. So that's why it's important to try to slow things down and get a hold on things quick.
Do you think cloud service providers should be doing more to help deal with this issue? Because, they have a vested interest in kind of making it easier for developers, but at the other end of the day, they also have a responsibility for security. So what should they be doing?
I don't honestly, and this is an opinion, this is me, William Collins, opinion time. I don't think they should do any more at this point. I think it's on the enterprise or whoever's building a platform. Here's the thing. If I go and I build a house and I decide to build my house without door locks, hey, anybody can build a house. There's lots of builders out there, but you don't want to build a house without door locks. Anybody can just walk right in and steal your intellectual capital, your property. So same thing with building things in the cloud. If you go out and you try to build a house without skills, without experience, and not even knowing like the outcome that you want to achieve, and then, something happens and then it all falls down, that's on you. And same with building things in the cloud. You can't go in there willy-nilly and just try to use different things and say, oh, I'm going to not really know about this, but I'm going to deploy it and then, cross my fingers. That's not a good strategy for anything.
What is your sense of our shift to DevSecOps? We hear a lot about shifting things left towards developers. Is that for real in your mind, or is it more about really just putting the guardrails in place and letting those guys do what they need to do? But are we really going to ask them to become security experts?
I'm really glad you asked that. That's a good question. The shift left thing, it's almost kind of a word now that's being overused, but it's super important. And that's something that, products like Alkira and any sort of born in the cloud product these days have to give you the ability to have a system to where you can shift it left, to where you can put your intent in the build pipeline, in the automation pipeline before it ever gets deployed into a production environment. So the new companies that are building on cloud now have to keep that in mind, that although it isn't on them to make you shift all of your stuff left, it is on them to provide you the ability to do so in the product. And that's important because when you shift left, you can actually, like I talked about earlier, you can enforce these policies and enforce these things before developers can even commit into source control. You can block pull requests. You can say, hey, you can have a policy set to trigger to say, hey, unless these policies and conditions are met, you can't actually even publish this or deploy it into source control. You can't commit it. So those are super important things. And that actually helps the developer because it gives them a system in which they can work to where they have to abide by these policies and these outcomes. But if they don't, they get a message. They're not allowed to continue forward until they meet those, that criteria.
Yeah. What is the role of the cybersecurity team then in this conversation where things are shifting left? What's left for them to do, and where would they interact with folks if they needed to?
So that's a hard one. And so networking and security, just in my experience over the past 10 years of doing this, they've been like the last two pieces of dragging things into the cloud. Everybody else is on board. Even the compute folks are like, yeah, we're automating things with CloudFormation and Terraform. We're deploying VMs in cloud, but network and security were really slow to make this transition. And now as DevSecOps and NetSecOps teams are coming in, it's on them to provide, they can't blame developers for going and deploying stuff. If their environment has given developers enough permissions to do so, that's on the sec part of the hat. They have to go back and ring those permissions in, and they have to build this policy as code in such a way to where the developers can move. They can move fast, but they can move fast responsibly. And that's where coming up with the, thinking through the strategy, looking at the identity and access management, looking at the infrastructure as code, being able to build these things in these pipelines to where it's convenient, because at this point you have to come into the I call it the DevOps tool chain. So the DevOps tool chain now is universal. It's going to cross network, security, compute, all these teams. They're going to have to speak the same language to make this successful.
How do I get all these people who are not DevOps specialists, especially those security folks, and to agree? Because do I just throw them all in a room and lock the door until reason prevails, or is there some other way of thinking about this?
In the earlier days when I was working with the enterprise, that is precisely what one enterprise did with a lot of teams. They flew everybody in, and we got in this big room, and there was this gigantic whiteboard, and they're like, this is the future this year. This is what we're doing. You're in here, you got to figure it out. And I'll tell you what, that was an interesting few days. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. But at the end of the day, it's got to come from a high level leadership change. And it has to be one of those things to where it can't be a program or a project. Like, this isn't an 8-month project. It's not a program with this budget tied to it. It is a cultural shift. It's like it's not a New Year's resolution that gets dropped in March. It's a lifestyle change. So this is on leaders, VP and above, like C-level down, to say, hey, this is the way we're moving things forward, and it's going to be a slow incremental change. It is, because the bigger the business, the more processes exist. The more processes exist, the more red tape. You have all these different things that basically you have to go through manually, because some of them, as processes get added over time, some of them you have to keep, but there's some that were put there for some reason and they're not even relevant anymore. You have to feed through all this stuff and understand it. And as far as like talent and, modernizing your talent, the business has to put in the time and the effort to uptrain and to, look at bringing in consultants or, partners to come in and maybe give you a steroid injection, a little boost to get you going and to help, show some results, because you got to have some quick results, but get the right foundations in place to where your people can come in and evolve like with this system.
Do you think a lot of organizations, though, they come down, or the senior leaders come down and they give the big speech and there's a bit of a sermon and everybody nods their head, but there's no tools or no plan, so everybody goes back to doing what they were doing before? So how do we kind of like close the gap between the intention, which is good, but sometimes the execution that is flawed?
It's funny that the more, especially in the large enterprise space, the more of these large enterprises I talk to, and thinking back to the ones that I worked for over the years, every business is different. One thing that I'm seeing, just specifically to your point, is historically enterprises were very hierarchical with how they're structured. So when a decision had to be made, it's like, okay, it goes from technical decision makers to like a manager, to an associate director, to a director, to an associate VP. And that's just on the network side, or the cloud side. And then it has to go down the security side. And then all these people have to be in the loop. You have to get, 20 people on a phone call, and then they have to be agreed before even a single decision can move forward. So what enterprises are doing these days, or thinking through, is sort of like flattening that structure and giving, I don't want to say individuals the autonomy to make these decisions and move forward with things, but like breaking that structure into smaller structures. So decisions can actually be made without everybody having to be on the Zoom to say yes.
All right. Well, hopefully it's going to turn into something that feels more like a team sport than the traditional us versus them kind of approach that we have in place. But William, thanks for sharing your insights.
Absolutely.
And back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone. We just took a quick little break here for lunch, but we're back in Austin at the Linux Foundation's Open Security Summit. And I'm really happy to be joined by our next guest. His name is Andrew Aiken. Andrew works for Wipro, WIPRO. And he is sort of, he is the Wipro rep to the Linux Foundation in various aspects and sub-foundations of the LF, as well as open source in general. But we're going to dive into that in a little bit here. Andrew, welcome to Techstrong TV. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So, Andrew, I did my best, right? But you could do better. Explain to the audience, what you do as part of Wipro. And I think most of our audience knows who Wipro is, but it probably wouldn't hurt to give them a little background on that too.
Sure. For those of you who may not be familiar with Wipro, we are one of the large global systems integrators, somewhere around 240,000 employees across the planet today. We are a fairly traditional systems integrator. We provide resources, solutions, technology, innovation to our clients, again, across the globe and across all industry sectors. My role, I am the head of open source for Wipro. I am in the office of CTO, my team and I. And really, we are the face of open source for Wipro and for the this community, the analyst community, clients, and so on. And I'm here representing Wipro for at the Open Source Summit and as the board observer for OpenSSF.
Excellent. So let's talk about Wipro a little bit. Look, you don't get 240,000 odd people without being deeply embedded into, a good chunk of the global 2000 and beyond.
Yep.
And with that kind of coverage, with that kind of footprint, when we talk about being the head of open source or what Wipro's, open source strategies and tools and everything are, there's a big chunk of business, right? When you think about how much software and so forth is based or either is open source or contains open source today, this is important.
It's very important. Right. Depending upon which of the analysts or reports that you subscribe to, over 90% of production software in the world today is either completely based on open source or has a portion of open source on it.
Yep.
So it's very critical software.
Absolutely. So, this isn't some dusty corner in the office of the CTO where people are mulling through open source licenses or something like that.
No.
This is really dynamic kind of stuff. Secondly, you mentioned you were an observer on the OSSF board, but I thought you were on another board or two as well.
I am. I'm on a few. The other one, the main one that I am the board member of is FinOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation, one of the very first vertically oriented industry foundations out there. Most foundations or projects or communities are horizontal, based on a technology. This is more vertically or industry oriented.
So that's not the FinOps people who are about cloud costs and stuff.
Right. No, this is FinOS with an S.
Oh,
FinTech Open Source. Yeah, so it was founded, I think, about 6 years ago now by 8 of the world's largest banks. And now they have dozens and dozens of members and organizations like Wipro and non-bank vendors. And it really was set up to provide an environment where financial services organizations can open source their own software in kind of a safe and compliant environment with a group of peers who understand what it means to develop software in such a highly regulated environment.
Got it. Excellent. And I forgive me if I didn't catch it. Was there a meeting of them here?
No, they have their own event. They have the Open Source Strategy Summit in London in 3 weeks, I think. That's kind of their version of this event. Cool. They are also under the Linux Foundation umbrella. They're a sub-foundation, as is OpenSSF and the other foundation activities.
Well, yeah, that's
it's the umbrella.
Right. It's the legal kind of format that I think LF favors. Yep. I always call them for some reason daughter foundations, and I don't know if that's today's world, if that's still apropos.
Just call them sub-foundations.
Sub-foundations sound good.
Yeah.
It's funny, I thought I knew about a lot of the foundations, but I'm not as familiar with FinOS.
It's one to take a look at. They're becoming a real industry driver. More and more global banks are joining them along with a number of the large tech vendors. So they're getting involved with some other interesting standards bodies. So they're beginning to promote open source as a standard within financial services.
Excellent. Well, what's the website for people who maybe want to find out?
Just finos.org, finos.org.
Okay, check it out.
Yep.
All right, let's go to OpenSSF. They had a big day here yesterday.
Yep.
We've interviewed a number of people from the OpenSSF over the last 2 days. You are a board observer there on behalf of Wipro. Right. What's your take?
Our CTO, Suba Tatavarte, is our board representative, but on the day-to-day basis, I'm the board observer and drive a lot of the programs. And today's obviously continuing more and more OpenSSF-related activities. I just spoke on a a panel about an hour ago. My takeaway is I'm glad to see more and more people are paying attention to this effort. Recently, I and my peers were in Washington, D.C. for a number of meetings with different agencies who are, again, also really beginning to pay attention to this issue, obviously driven by Biden's executive orders over a year ago. But my takeaway is it's interesting to see the overall industry momentum and the collaboration between public and private sector on some of these software supply chain security initiatives.
Absolutely. So let me play devil's advocate. So I've been in security for 25 years. I've been in technology for 30 plus years. And in security, we always had open source tools that we used to secure all software. The OpenSSF's charter is to secure open source software, which is great, right? When 90% of software contains open source.
Yep, it's important.
It's an important thing. What I'm worried about with the whole supply chain, SBOMs, and all of these things is, will we focus so much on open source that maybe something else sneaks through that's not open source?
That's likely to happen, right? Sneaks through? I don't know.
Well,
by definition,
sneak.
by definition, it kind of sneaks through, right?
Right.
Doesn't matter whether it's open source or proprietary. But will it do that because there's too much attention on open source? I don't know that that's the case. I don't know if that can be the case. The fact is there's not enough attention today. We've heard there's a whole bunch of initiatives, for example, around SBOM everywhere, SBOM anywhere, right? We did our own survey of our customers and got about 65 responses, I think. And of those, a dozen were actually asking for SBOMs. Far fewer were getting SBOMs, and then even the SBOMs they received, they couldn't really do much with them. So the fact that there's a lot of talk around SBOMs and Biden's executive orders doesn't mean that there's actually a lot going on at the end user consumer point. Right? We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't doubt it, right? And especially when you're looking at 90% of the software has open source. Look, if you could cover 90%, that's pretty damn good.
Yes.
I think also part of it is we spent so long kind of fight, and when I say we, I mean at the enterprise level, right? For so long, a lot of enterprises sort of fought open source software. It was like, oh no, who are you going to call for support? How are you going to get training?
I get it.
And then there was this also, especially as I was coming up, right? There was this like two-faced argument, which is, well, open source software is more secure by design because there's more eyeballs on it.
Yep.
And, how could something be insecure when everyone's... But the fact of the matter is, who the heck looks at the source code? Very few people are actually, unfortunately, we're testing these open source tools, components, whatever, that you just, Andrew used it, good enough for me, I'll use it too. And so we, it really became, it was a fallacy about the open eyes. Or how many sets of eyes were on it.
Not necessarily fallacy. It was actually the impact was maybe not what that truism says, right? Because people, and I've been in open source for 22 years. I was probably one of the very first people to be wearing a suit in open source. And I fought many of those early battles. And I think the issue is that developers, open source developers, people who are creating all this new innovative technology, right? They don't grow up thinking about secure by design, right? Or secure from the ground up. They just wanted to get good code out there, or code and make it good over time and make it innovative and make it useful to themselves and to others, right? They weren't worrying about the security issues. And today, that's one of the challenges for the OpenSSF and its members, is working with the projects and helping them understand why it's important to implement secure coding best practices and providing them the resources to do so, because OpenSSF represents Big Brother, right? If you look at who the members are, that's just the reality or the perception that many open source projects have is, okay, we should be improving the way we develop software, but we don't want you to tell us how.
Right.
And so you have to find this balance, as the OpenSSF has to find this balance in working with the projects and communities and saying we're here to help, and we truly are, and we're not going to try and change the way you develop software totally. We're going to try and help you improve it.
Good. Agreed. Now, the other thing that I spent a lot of today talking to a bunch of folks from OpenSSF, but I've spoken to a bunch of other people as well on various sub-foundations or subgroups within Linux Foundation. It's amazing, and maybe it's just because when you hammer, everything looks like a nail, but it's amazing to me how much oxygen OpenSSF is attracting right now.
Absolutely.
I think it speaks to just how important it is.
It does.
But the security guy in me says, yeah, I've heard this story before. top three priority.
Yeah.
And here we are still with issues that we haven't addressed.
So OpenSSF is still primarily vendor driven. There are some end user consumer organizations like JP Morgan and Citi and a few others, right? That's going to change. Over time, I expect more end users to join. But it's a vendor-driven organization who understands the issue, because we're the ones that actually use the open source to build our products and then bring those products to market, sell them to our consumers. Our customers, right? So we know at kind of a core level that this is a huge issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that the end user consumer, even if they recognize it as an issue, has the ability to actually do anything about it. One of the things I shared during my talk is how many titles that I've seen at our customers, just the title has gone from DevOps to DevSecOps. And when you ask those people, so what does that mean now that you have those additional 3 letters in your title? And they're like, not really much of anything. Right?
So you're preaching to the choir.
There's lip service.
We are DevOps.com.
Okay.
But we're also Security Boulevard, and I've been bringing the DevSecOps event to RSA for 7 years.
Yep.
And I've said this publicly before. To me, there was always Sec in DevOps. It was always part of it. But by putting those 3 letters in there, we clearly sent a message to the security community that, hey, you're part of this too. Not necessarily that shift left and security is everyone's responsibility wasn't already something we should be doing, but it gave the security folks who for a long time were a wandering tribe in the desert, right? Because they weren't really part of IT. They were kind of in risk in some places. In other places, they were IT. They were clearly other, right? Not them, other. And so it made them, right? And that was a good thing.
Excuse me. I do want to point out that adding those 3 letters hasn't necessarily translated to additional training, additional headcount, additional budget. It is, you are now DevSecOps, figure it out without any additional resources.
So I'll tell you what, and I spend a good chunk of my time talking to vendors who offer DevSecOps solutions and to end users who employ them. Here's the funny thing. No, it hasn't necessarily added to budget. And in fact, most DevSecOps solutions still come out of the security budget, not out of the developer budget or DevOps, if you want to call it that budget. And that's the fact, right?
I understand is true. But what we are seeing is that more traditional DevOps tools are now beginning to include security components to it. So that's a very positive development, I think. It is now bringing additional capabilities to the tools that many DevOps people have been using for years.
And a lot of that, I'll tell you, is through partnerships. Like the Sneak, for instance, does a great job with
absolutely
partners. There's another company, Shift Left. There's a bunch of the DevSecOps vendors who recognize that, look, in order to make tools for developers, you got to kind of embed this stuff in the tools they're using.
Yep.
Or the platforms they're on, or whatever you want to call it. And because everyone today's a platform. But it's interesting, and it bodes well, right?
Yeah. That's my
it'll
point.
Make a difference.
I think it bodes well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, we're over time, but Andrew,
Okay.
I want to talk about WePro a
Yes.
little bit. WePro. I mean, obviously, CTO on the board of OpenSSF.
Mm-hmm.
You are kind of the liaison to Linux Foundation open source. Beyond the obvious, why is this so important to WePro?
It boils down to trust, right? We talk about being a trusted partner to our clients. How can you do that if you're not paying attention to their security, whether your customers are or not, right? So that is at the end of the day the core reason that we're investing in this. Now there are all sorts of other benefits, but it's making sure that our customers have real trust in us. Understand that from a software security perspective, we have their best interests. And there's all sorts, again, there's benefits in upskilling our resources by participating here and through contributing, through the training programs. It helps with our branding and our differentiation, our ability to recruit good developers. There are all these are other.
A lot of benefits.
These are core benefits, but at the end of the day, it's trust.
Excellent, man. Hey, I want to thank you for coming on today, and I want to thank you for all the work you're doing in the community.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the
it.
time.
All righty. Andrew Aiken from WePro here, board observer at OpenSSF, board member of FinOS, another Linux foundation. And what did you say, about 3 weeks? There's a big FinOS conference in London.
FinOS, yeah, in London. Yep.
Excellent. All right, we're going to take a break. We've got a full lineup this afternoon of folks here. So stand by. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here at Yalla DevOps. It's actually a lunch break here. It's a little chaotic.
Very lively.
Very lively. That's a good way of putting it. Let me introduce you to Or Weiss. Or's been with us before, but not in person.
First time in person.
Yep. And, ooh, that lights in my eyes. Or is with Permit.io, and it's .io. And you know what, Or, before we jump into Yalla and what's going on here, let's give you a quick company background.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with my own background.
Good.
So my name is Or Weiss. Background starts in the intelligence corps, like a lot of Israeli entrepreneurs. Then I worked in a startup that did containers before containers were a thing. Was a VP of R&D in a cybersecurity company. And then I created another company that actually presents here, and maybe you talked with Rookout.
I know them well, sure.
And when I was at Rookout, I ended up rebuilding access control for our product 5 times when the company wasn't even 3 years old.
Right.
And I said, I don't want to build this once, let alone 5 times. So that drove me crazy. And getting together with my now co-founder Asaf, who worked at Facebook, we saw that, for example, at Facebook, they invested a team of 30 people for half a decade to build their level of access control, and they're still building.
Yeah.
So it's annoying for developers building it on their own, and it's constantly giving and increasing. So we thought we should put an end to that. And that's what Permit.io does. It's a full stack permission solution. You bake into your product and you're done.
So, look, in my mind anyway, part of the issue is that with moving to the cloud, and now we're talking about moving to the edge and all of these things, in many ways, access control has become the killer app for cloud security, for security, right? Where when I was doing security 20 years ago, we had the moat and perimeter with a drawer bridge, right? And that was where the action was.
The moat's gone. Everything's melted away.
The perimeter's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, So there used to be the Jericho Forum that used to talk about the end of the perimeter and micro perimeters and all of these things. So there is a perimeter, but it's almost like an individual perimeter around the individual or the machine or whatever that
Microservices now.
Yes. And so access has become, I mean, the killer app, but as a result of that, it's also become very much more complex. It's not as easy as it used to be, which is why, with all due respect, you had to rewrite it 5 times in 3 years.
Exactly. Also, because it's evolving, so even if you don't go too way back, like if you go 5 years, 10 years back, you'd have like mostly monolithic applications. And then within those, like in Ruby, you'd have Rails with administration. In Python, you'd have Django with its administration panel, Java with Spring Framework. You'd have like a unified basic layer that you can do access control for your product with. But as you move to microservices, that becomes irrelevant because you have different microservices with different languages and you need to control all of them. So instead of having one spot, you need a little bit of access control, a little bit of permissions in every little bit of code you write. And that creates a distributed area that is very hard to maintain, manage, keep track of. And so new technologies need to come in. And so we started with adopting open source and promoting open source software like OPA, Open Policy Agent.
Sure.
But also creating open projects like our own, OPAL, Open Policy Administration Layer, which allows you to work with a lot of OPA instances in scale and update them in real time. And only then could we actually build the service that we're providing now, which gives you the interfaces and management on top.
Well, but to me, this whole thing is very kind of cloud native, open source in that, you know, it's also the way, I mean, I'm looking at you people at home can't see, but there was just, there's a big billboard up there, big screen, and it just said 92% of applications contain open source today, which is a number, I've heard 90%, so 92 is not far up.
That's not surprising at all.
Not surprising.
Even if it said like 99%, I wouldn't be surprised.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. Because the way we build applications have really become sort of that factory model where we have third-party components. Right? And we get our suppliers, and some components we make ourselves, but a lot of it is third-party components we put together.
And it becomes more and more. So, like 5-10 years ago, you'd be like, I'm not going to use an authentication vendor. I'm not going to trust them.
I don't trust.
Yeah. Nowadays, it's the complete opposite. Like, what am I
don't want that aggregation. Someone else is doing.
Billing, same thing. Analytics, same thing. And there's a lot more coming in, especially in the form of AI agents.
Yes.
Those are going to proliferate the space completely. And just think about how you manage permissions for your AI agent working with my AI agent in a third-party application. So we're just seeing the beginning of the pain here.
Yeah. Well, and you've got, I think, microservice plays into that. Look, for me, I first became really acutely aware of this. So I have a strong connection to Boulder, Colorado.
Great town.
Yeah. Well, I had a place there for many years. I started a company based in Boulder, co-founded a company based in Boulder. But, you know, my friends at SendGrid, I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, of course. They're still, they're part of Twilio now, right?
Yes, they're Twilio. Yeah. But, you know, SendGrid to me opened my eyes to the idea of, look, they took the issue of how to kick an email off and send the email off the developer's plate. You were developing an application, and when someone signed up, you had to get that verification email. Or, you know, something in the application. You didn't have to rewrite that. You didn't have to invent that wheel.
Yeah.
You just.
By the way, everything we're seeing here is just regular evolution of technology. Like, you start with everyone's doing a bit of everything, and then you start to specialize. You can even go back to hunter-gatherer times, where people would have, like, shape their own spears, and then there would be the one guy that creates a better spear, and then you get
everyone copied it.
Yeah, and then it spreads out.
So look, the fact is, there's very little revolutionary in technology. It's evolutionary.
Right.
And so you build it, and then you apply learning from one area to another area.
And gradually what we'll be seeing is the applications we're building will become more and more proprietary. So developers, which by the way, I think everyone's becoming a developer.
Yes.
Low code, no code developers, regular
Absolutely.
developers. So everyone will be writing software, but the things that they'll be writing will be more and more proprietary, more and more unique to them, and everything else would become specialized layers that you can consume as either open source, services, products, etc., etc.
But it gets built to the end user. You don't necessarily see those layers or those parts. It's just an application, right?
Exactly.
They do.
And now we just need good layers, good connectors between those layers, so everything can play in securely, safely, in a way that we can manage. And that's where we kind of want to come in.
That's part of access.
Right.
Also API security you're starting to talk about now. That's a whole nother hot topic.
For sure.
Anyway, let me turn quickly to Yala.
Yala.
What do you think of the show?
I think it's amazing. As we already said, it's very lively. People are asking questions. They're engaged. I've been in a lot of conferences. A lot of times you have just people asking, "Give me swag."
Yeah.
So
But those trick-or-treaters, I call them.
Yeah, that's a good definition for it. I'll use it. But here people are really interested in building things. They're really interested in thinking about how they're taking the technology and solutions forward. And what was particularly interesting for me was to see the difference between how developers and DevOps react to themes here in the conference. So for example, with us, with permits, so developers are really like, how do I get rid of this problem of permissions? DevOps people would say, how do I make sure that when the developers do this, they don't mess up?
Right. That's in it. You're the first person to bring that up. It's an interesting thing. I'm going to steal that from you.
Yeah, it's an even trade now.
Absolutely. Hey, for people again, permit.io, right?
Yeah.
Or thanks for coming on. I'm going to let you go eat lunch. Always a pleasure.
You too.
It's great to see you in person.
Until next time.
We'll see you soon, hopefully.
Bye, everyone.
All right. We're here at Yala. We'll be back.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hi again, everyone. Hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had a great set of interviews with some amazing guests to give you the latest and greatest. And alongside our airing of The Lab with Brendan O'Leary and Engineering the Change, we had some fantastic content today. We'll be back again on Thursday, so we hope to see you then. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.